Hello and welcome to another episode of Despite the Challenges, a show where we showcase people who, despite their challenges and impeding circumstances, not only they turn around their own lives, but go out in a community and contribute in so many amazing ways. Today, my guest is Vivian Gaspar. She had gone through very tragic circumstances. She had been not only a televised guest at national television, ABC, NBC, Fox Network, but she has written many books. She has helped hundreds of families to reverse the challenges that they had faced in dealing with foreclosures. So let's hear a little bit more from Vivian directly. Vivian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rintu, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show today.
Welcome. So tell us about your story.
In 2004, now 12 years ago, unfortunately, I was happily in love, but then things started getting very rocky, and I was looking at facing separation and divorce. So when I came to telling my parents, especially my father, who is a very old-fashioned man. My parents came here from Hungary in the 1960s, and actually, believe it or not, my father is from Transylvania. Oh. And my parents love my husband, and I had to tell them, I'm sorry, I'm getting separated. But of course, their first concern was for the safety of my children and myself. And as a woman, there's always possible dangers. So for example, if you're a tenant somewhere, that means the landlord has a copy of the keys to where you live. And of course, people could set up cameras, and there's just not as much security as if you're completely in control. And of course, my parents are very concerned. And they said, instead of me going out to rent someplace to live, they helped me by buying a house. My parents live across the country, and of course, I'm still here in New Jersey. So they bought a home as an investment property as far as a mortgage concerned for them, but for me, it's where the primary place where my children and I lived.
Okay, so they were just trying to help you out.
Yes, they were. Okay. And fast forward a little bit, I was a mortgage loan officer. Okay. Now, things were going really well in 2004, right?
Yes, yes.
However, as we may have heard about a little thing called the mortgage crisis.
Yes.
When that
a lot
hit,
of victims.
Well, I worked at the time. So now 2007 comes, and I was working since 2006, early actually, I apologize, 2005, for a company called New Century. In 2006, they had originated $56 billion.
Wow.
I did end up reconciling with my husband. He had moved into the house with me, fast forward.
That is the house that your parents bought.
That's correct. And I was, at the time, March of 2007, things were going well with my personal life finally, but we had stayed in that house. And the mortgage situation was going well. At the time, things were not felt that it was collapsing yet.
Yes.
There was just trickles, because of course nothing happens immediately overnight. It's not Wall Street. There was not a 500-point crash overnight, for example. So I was 3 months pregnant. No one knew, because you don't tell people that quickly, right? You want to wait a little bit. And I actually had acquired New Century's largest corporate sponsorship a client.
Okay.
And they were based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I went to fly to that client's site in March of 2007. I was 3 months pregnant. I was flying. I come back from this business trip, and I was told from management and of course my coworkers the very next day, guess what? No new originations.
Which means?
That means we could not do our job. We were called mortgage originators.
Okay.
Now that is a very scary thing. Wait a second. We're not allowed to do our jobs? What's going on? So I knew that there was some kind of very bad writing on the wall.
Yes.
Because with logic comes that we knew what kind of mortgages were available. They were really pushing adjustable rate mortgages. And they were very common to have 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year arms. And some of them were coming due, and we didn't know exactly everything was happening, but that was a very big red flag. And as someone who is pregnant and about to show, and let's face it, no one likes to hire for any position available a pregnant woman. Because they're going to have to take maternity leave.
Of course.
So I had to be with the first rat off that sinking ship. So I changed mortgage companies. As I got more and more pregnant, luckily I found another job quickly. But then that company went out of business, and so on and so forth for 5 mortgage companies. There was actually a website at the time called mortgageimplode.com. So go another year into it. In the spring of 2008, there's been many months where I couldn't even make a living at all because all these mortgage companies kept going out of business. And this is an all-commission trade I'm in.
Yes, and at that time, I think by 2008, we were pretty bad.
Drenched.
The situations were, even though I was not affected directly with any sort of the mortgage crisis, but things were pretty bad economy.
The economy was terrible.
Yes.
And by the way, have you seen the movie The Big Short? It was out of in theaters a few months back, early part of 2016.
I haven't had a chance yet, but I think it's on the list.
I lived that. That was my life. And this mortgage company I'm referring to, New Century, was actually featured as one of the banks that were in trouble in this movie.
Okay.
So really, I was living what was going on in this movie, The Big Short. So I couldn't pay my mortgage. Okay? I may have been living with my husband, but he was unemployed for a while. He was a consultant. And the next thing I knew, the only thing I could do, and by the way, I was also a licensed real estate agent, but that doesn't make you immune. You're still all commission. So I was recommended by attorneys that I knew, by people in the real estate industry. The only thing you can do, because there was no such a thing yet as mortgage modification. It wasn't even in existence yet.
Yes.
So the only thing people knew what to do to tell a homeowner who couldn't pay their mortgage is to sell the house. And of course, now we're talking upside down mortgage. The house is more than $80,000 underwater. So I had 2 mortgages. We actually were able to, in 2004, buy the house at no money down. And it's not an optimal situation. I understand. I wasn't being foolish. I was at the time in a crisis. I was just separated. I didn't have an option. It wasn't that I was being a foolish person being in the industry, but it's circumstances.
It's a business decision.
Yes,
sort of business decision because you're dealing with a lender, right? So you need to look at your options. And so many of us, and a couple with an average income, with a family, or even if it's an above average income, people have similar situations. So by this time, the modification that you just mentioned, I just want to make sure for our viewers, refinancing options were still available for those who would qualify.
But remember something, not if you're underwater. At the time, there was no such a thing as these programs that existed. The HAMP and HARP program came into play in 2009. We're still talking spring, early summer of 2008.
Yes.
They weren't even made available yet. So we're only talking, the only thing that could have helped my family, which is what we ended up doing, was a short sale. The reason I mentioned that there was 2 mortgage companies, and it was we had an 80% and 20% mortgage, is because the second mortgage company was the one where it was completely taking a loss. And the only way they would approve a short sale for us was if I signed a personal promissory note to promise to pay back $65,000. It is 2016 now. I am still making those payments. Almost 9 years later, or 8 years and change later.
So let's step back. So at that time when you prepared for the short sale.
So here's the most fascinating part. As I'm unfortunately losing the house, my children in school and so forth.
And you're expecting?
No, actually my son was about a year and change now.
Okay.
Because that was 2007.
I just want to make
this is now 2008. So my son is about a year and a half old.
All right.
Still a young child. And I just had to do the short sale. Now, we didn't do the short sale because it was a strategy and had to go to another house. Fortunately, we did have my husband's in-laws to live with. However, they're 50 miles away from this house. My son was 17, a high school senior. So unfortunately, to keep him to graduate in his high school, I had to then move my family 50 miles away. And my oldest son, unfortunately, I had to rent a room for him. And not even a spare bedroom, but he ended up having to live on a mattress on the floor in someone's house to finish high school in the town. That was a hardship for him to go through.
And that time is very sensitive.
I mean, as a high school senior.
Yes.
And of course, let's face it, I think in most families, if you put together a daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law, it's still two women, it's still a struggle, it was hard. And of course, my in-laws being old-fashioned people, different generation, it was difficult for them to grasp somebody who's really of the self-employed nature. They didn't understand. They understand you go to an office, you make a set salary, and that's it. Anything else is kind of weird and fishy.
Yes. Yes.
So here's what's very interesting. After we short sold the house, and I had to live at my in-laws, believe it or not, within 2 months later, I was speaking to the attorney who did a lot of the negotiation process for the short sale.
Okay.
And he did a lot of my clients' closings when I was an active mortgage loan officer.
I see. Okay.
And I was having a conversation. I said, Jim, what are you doing? What's going on with you? And he said, Vivian, if you can't start the mortgage, you can't originate it, I can't close it. So he had a very hard time because more than half of his practice, his law firm's practice as a sole practitioner attorney, he was sinking fast because he couldn't, they didn't have, if mortgage companies were not allowing new mortgages to happen and this whole industry is collapsing upon
kind
itself.
of a ripple effect.
It's a humongous ripple effect. So he said, I don't know what I want to do. I'm an attorney. I'm in my 50s. Do I start flipping hamburgers at Burger King? What do I do?
No, not a good option.
I couldn't make a living. I didn't want. I couldn't be in a mortgage, but I really enjoyed being mortgage savvy. And of course, as a licensed real estate agent, that was not a viable option as well. And so we decided to, he found out about something that was beginning. It was in the infancy stages called mortgage modification.
That was the meltdown.
It was
is the market meltdown,
but
recession,
it was a way of
whatever
helping,
term you want to.
But it was no rules and regulations around it yet at that point.
It's too new,
brand new. And I said, "What's this mortgage modification?" And he said, "It's just like negotiating a short sale, and they've just now started doing it." He said, "I'm so sorry. I wish this was available when we had to get rid of your house. It's a tragedy, but here's the thing: if I never lost that house, the whole career that I had following since then, since fall of, only a few months later, fall of 2008, and I'm still very active working with the attorney because you must be an attorney to work with banks. I handle the client side. I do a ton of public education, so people need to understand. But thank God this all happened, because since then, I have literally helped over 350 New Jersey families stop their foreclosures and lower the payments with mortgage modification with over a 95% success ratio.
I want to stop you right here. Just for my audience, I want to, just for their clarification, people who may not be as familiar with these terms or have a situation that want a little bit more clarification. Modification is not refinance.
No.
These are the overpriced or overestimated
loans. Let me clarify on this, if I may, please.
Why don't you do that?
In March of 2009, believe it or not, just 6 months later, President Obama enacted 2 different acts. One is called the HAMP program, which is what we work with. It's the Home Affordability, HA. M stands for modification. P is protection. So it's the Home Affordability Mortgage Protection Act. It's a law, so it's an act. And then you had the HARP. HARP is the Home Affordability, R stands for refinance. So now, if you want to refinance into a going rate, and the only thing stopping you is to have a lack of equity, because of course you know you have to have equity to refinance, but let's say you have the proper amount of income, and you have good credit or good enough to refinance, you just don't have the equity. That's where the HARP program comes in.
I see.
However, if someone's truly in hardship, because don't forget, to refinance, you cannot have more than one late on your mortgage history. 2, if it's FHA mortgage. Any more than that, it's impossible for anyone to refinance you, even with the HARP program.
I see.
HAMP program is for people in major jeopardy, whether it's divorce or joblessness, or if they're self-employed and they've lost business revenue for a number of reasons.
For a number of reasons.
You could have illness, or
Yes.
you become a caretaker of one of your family members who's become ill. There's many reasons that someone becomes in crisis.
Yes.
And therefore, that's an opportunity and a perfect time to do the modification.
Okay.
And at the same time, we remediated or stopped the foreclosure. However, you didn't have to be in foreclosure to get a modification.
I see.
And because so many people do not understand the difference, that's where I decided to make it my mission to not just stop the foreclosures and do the actual work, because people actually still have to qualify. If you didn't make any income at all, I would educate you on getting a forbearance. Forbearance is putting your mortgage on halt for a few months, but it's not indefinite.
So the few months, that gives them a little bit breathing room and
Yes,
thinking
just
room.
a few months. It puts a pause button on a
Pause
mortgage.
without any further damage.
Right. However, that's not a good enough solution for the vast majority of people in hardship. So, but they still have to qualify. And if they don't qualify, there are still other options that can help them. And I'm still
see.
doing this actively.
I see.
But that's why we still have to qualify people, but I really love educating the public. I've spoken for the Department of Labor's job seekers groups. I've spoken at Rotary clubs, at white girl offices. I educate a lot of real estate agents because they're usually the first person that someone in trouble, a homeowner in trouble, seeks out is a real estate agent, thinking
wanna
that their
know
only
them.
recourse is to sell the house. Would you
Yes.
like to know how many real estate agents have referred me clients?
Oh, I
They're
can
really good
imagine.
people. And they could be getting short sale listings or listings in general if there's equity. Not everyone's underwater who has trouble making their mortgage payments. Sometimes they have equity and they think their only recourse is to sell the house, but instead these really good-hearted realtors realize that they'll get more referrals if they help them instead. They stay in the house instead of sell it. So then they refer them to me.
I see.
So I've spoken
I
to
see.
a lot of Weichert locations and Remax and Berkshire, tons of different real estate agencies, because I want them to educate the public at whole and create that ripple effect of education.
All right. So what was the turning point for you at that time?
Well, then I additionally had a lot of people coming up to me, begging me when I was speaking to write a book.
Okay.
But previously in my career,
So this was the Stop My Crises. This was your first book.
well,
This-
actually I released both simultaneously.
both simultaneously, and you mentioned that this was for general public.
Yes.
All right. And
That includes information on mortgage
And-
modification, bankruptcy. There's 40 topics covered in each book. Actually,
see.
one has 41 topics,
Okay.
and the other has 40.
so this one, the Stop My Crises for the business, be the 1 in 5.
Yes, the Be the 1 in 5 means only 20% of small business owners stay in business after starting the business more than 5 years.
I see.
So you want to be amongst that 20% that survive and thrive after 5 years. And having owned and started 5 businesses of my own, I'm always one to have the heart of the small business owner.
Okay.
Because small business owners employ 45% of the workforce.
Yes.
And the more we help
Yes.
them, the more jobs that are created.
Yes, those are the main street jobs,
Right.
right? So small town, main street jobs, the local entrepreneurs, small businesses provide. When these books, both of them, had their beginning, what was going on in your career and how things were changing economically.
Ready for this? I was writing the books as almost my part-time endeavor, or a side job, if you will, while I was still doing my 40, 50 hours a week, going around meeting people, speaking, and helping them resolve their mortgage issues. So I've always been doing mortgage modifications since late 2008, and I'm still doing it currently. But in addition to the books, I've done over 50 radio interviews. And because part of my journey, because of the stress that was going on in 2007, 2008, I had my son, and the stress of my circumstances, to be perfectly honest, I did gain a lot of weight. But in the last 5 years,
Stress
I was
can do
successful.
that.
Yeah, it really can. But at least with really pushing myself very hard, I was fortunate and I worked very hard through it, but I did lose then 55 pounds.
Wow. That's an
So-
accomplishment itself.
You got to keep pushing yourself because it's the only
Yes.
way to help yourself, your
Yes.
family, and change the world with your community.
I know writing a book is such a beautiful experience. Depending on, it doesn't matter what the topic is, it really brings a different side of you outside. Anything noteworthy that you would like to share with our audience? Writing this book, not only the whole story to help others, but how did it impact you personally?
Well, first of all, it was a huge jigsaw puzzle. Because if you
Interesting.
think about it, I had several components that I had to, first of all, I had to vet and approve and meet the right people that I wanted to have as contributing authors.
Okay.
So I have over 50 experts,
So you
most
have-
of which local New Jersey experts.
And there's some common for the both books?
Yes.
Okay.
So because there's 81 topics. So as an example, one of the experts is a LinkedIn expert. And he has written one chapter for each book. One is to help a business owner grow their business on LinkedIn. And the other is how to use LinkedIn for job search. There's
Okay.
about 8 chapters at least on job search efforts.
Okay.
And there, I try to make that more unique aspects to something. So, for example, I do have a recruiter who's been in the business over 30 years, and she not just did the typical, here's how to do your job search.
Yes.
However, I asked her, let's dig a little deeper and have an additional chapter because every recruiter deals with so many people who have very, very similar credentials. So let's
Yes,
say,
because they become specialized. Yes.
well, so let's say, for example, you are a administrative assistant, okay? There's hundreds of administrative assistants that one recruiter deals with. So let's say you're one of those seeking a job. How do you stand out so that job opening
That's
that
always
the
a-
next recruiter that recruiter has, the next job opening that comes available, you want them to stick you into that opening or to present you for that opportunity. But what happens to the other 100 people
Yes.
that are equally qualified? So one of the chapters is called How to Stand Out to Your Recruiter. And that's just one example. I also have an attorney, a matrimonial attorney, who talked about, of course, what to do if you're all of a sudden facing for divorce. So that chapter is cleverly titled, What to Do When He or She Says, I'm Out of Here.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
have this another wonderful lady who is a survivor of domestic abuse for over 20 years. And she wrote a chapter to even recognize the symptoms. Are you even a victim of domestic abuse? Because
Yes.
no one wants to acknowledge that they are.
That is an area usually very private. Most cultures do not. People do not want to acknowledge
I think
it.
it's human
Even it's-
nature. It's across the board, I think.
Yes, yes. Domestic violence, I could say that, being a filmmaker and working in a domestic violence, helping victims, very difficult for them to admit. But I want to make a point here for our audience specifically that, as Vivian is saying, either it's job or divorce or mortgage, anything, all that affect our lives, all those major financial impacts. There is a big, big change that affects negatively in most cases.
Causes all the tension in the
Yes.
household.
So the name Stop My Crises. So how does one benefit from listening or reading to this?
Well, first of all, this is not just for those in any kind of financial crisis. There's also a chapter in the general public book, the Facing Life's Challenges Head On, that will even cover how to speak to your aging parents. Let's face it, the people between, say, 30 to 60 years old are the sandwich generation.
Yes.
I myself, my father is severely ill right now because he had a very bad car accident in March, but he's 80 years old when it happened. Now he's 81. And he had brain damage from it, which exasperated and is declining tremendously right now. And the point in mentioning that is I never did have that talk with my parents, but this is something that people need to do. I have young children at home, and I have a father who's 80 and a mother who's 70. So I, like many people, are in this generation that have to deal with this. So that is not socioeconomically tied. That is not a financial hardship.
Okay.
Anybody, you could be a millionaire and have that hardship.
Absolutely.
And there's actually chapters additionally. For example, the business book. You'd think the business book is just about how to make more money. But no, there's so many solopreneurs out there. Let's say you're a real estate agent. It's like you might have a support system. For example, let's say if you're a Weichert agent, or if you're, doesn't matter who you work for. You do have a support system. I myself work for Bernardsville Exit. However, that being said, it's really important to remember it's still like your own business. You have expenses, you have your E&O expenses, you have your advertising expenses, and you have your income. So I don't care who you are. Many people as small business owners and sales professionals feel isolated. So I have several topics that deal with the psychology of dealing with that. One of them is called Get Off Your Arse Mindset. How to overcome the emotional challenges. There's a lot of very practical information, so it's not just financial hardship.
I see.
By the way, I'm happy to announce that starting less than 2 months ago, with the same title, Stop My Crisis, I am now also a host of my TV show with the same name, Stop My Crisis, on Princeton TV.
Congratulations. So and you have another book coming, My Mortgage Lender, My Bully.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
The reason I started writing My Mortgage Lender, My Bully, and I'm still in the process, it's to be released in the fall of 2016. I actually have had several clients whose husbands committed suicide because they could not handle the pressure of what the mortgage companies were doing to them while they're in the foreclosure process. I am telling you, it is not an exaggeration. They're actual clients. And
also, now we cannot go into a whole lot of detail because of our time constraints.
Of course, but that's why I'm doing it, to expose these actual true stories. They're submitted stories by real people. Of course, to respect their situation, the names have been changed to protect confidentiality, but these are real life situations. I have sat in hundreds and hundreds of families' homes hearing these, and they're common threads of what the mortgage companies, and by the way, they're all doing it. I'm not picking on any one company, and I am
and that
just
is at the time of the foreclosures.
It's still happening.
Okay.
I have a new client this past January, a few months ago. I met her. She's living it right now. She's still in the situation, and it started a few years ago, and her husband just couldn't handle it. He committed suicide. I have another,
and that doesn't resolve any. Committing suicide does not.
It exasperates the problem.
You are leaving the problem even more for people behind. So if I were to ask you, based on with the outstanding work that you have done over the years, overcoming your own circumstances and helping hundreds of people, what would be your advice for people if they are in a situation?
First of all, very few people have truly no one in their life. You know, you usually have someone who loves you. Remember them. Stay strong for those who love you. Regardless of the situation you're facing, remember, the whole old-fashioned saying of tomorrow's another day, it really is the truth. Things change so dramatically. When I put out an email to a lot of people I'm in contact with, just 2 weeks ago, to announce the new TV show here on Princeton TV, the Stop My Crisis TV show, I didn't expect anything other than maybe a few people will watch, right? I was immediately contacted by HIPS New Jersey's TV producers, and a few days later I was interviewed by a show that has over 400,000 YouTube watchers.
Wow.
You never know what the next opportunity can happen. It can happen on the flip of a coin.
Yes.
Never know what life brings you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. It was a pleasure having you on our show. We have run out of time. And for our viewers, I hope you'll find this information helpful to deal with the situation you may have or know someone else who is going through the situation. And I thank you again for joining us today. This was another episode of Despite the Challenges, and I'm host Ritu Chopra. Until next time.